So between this video and the last video, I've gone through and changed the look of everything. I've made 3 different levels. So you can see here I've got my start screen, level 1, level 2, level 3. I did change my naming system from spelling out the number of the level to the using the actual number. And here's why. Obviously, whenever I was putting them in by word alphabetically, it made sense reading it, but in a list, 2 was coming before, or 3 was coming before 2 because TH comes before TW, and so that was confusing. So I went back and I renamed those, um, and now it all is in order and makes more sense to me, even though um, order wise now I've got the start screen down here in game. It's fine, but at least my levels are in order, and that's what I really care about. Now that I have that done, I've also added some text in a fancy text. I found a font that I really like called Robot Head, and I've decided I'm going to name my game Robo Escape. So it just seemed kind of funky, a little bit like cutesy. I use Text Mesh Pro to make nice, crisp text for my title and for my buttons. I just, on my buttons, deleted the original text and added a Text Mesh Pro text to it. Very simple. I'm pretty sure you guys are pretty comfortable with Text Mesh Pro text now. Like I said, you didn't have to use Text Mesh Pro text. I just like how very crisp it renders. Seems to work a little bit better. And I also did change it up a little bit, so I'll just play through just a tiny bit to show you. So whenever I start the game, I've got this level, and then I decided that I want to change the colors of my backgrounds on each level. And there are a couple of things that I have noticed. One, our ball definitely has way too much friction because it is slowing down every time it touches the surface, and we do not want that. That's not the behavior that we want. So we have that material in the materials folder. Let's take the friction to 0 on that and see if that helps. Go to the next level and go to the next level, and I know I can kind of shoot it around. Yep, there we go. That moved much better, much less sluggish. So that fixes that. And then we need a way to die on the bottom. I also had a thought, and I think it would be kind of neat if there was another scene that was specifically for winning. Like there was a game over scene, this screen for when you lose the game at the very end, and then maybe a more happy screen for when you win, you make it through all the levels. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to copy my game over screen, and I'm going to set it up so that whenever my this is at the end of my play order, after the levels but before game over, so that it'll come up next. So I'm going to duplicate game over, and I'm going to rename this one the win screen because it's obviously different. I'm going to use my camera background to change my color. I think of winning as kind of like a generally green thing. And let's change this text from game over to winning text. And let's change what it says. You won. It's not terribly thrilling, I know, or inspired, but it makes me happy. And let us go to our build settings now that we have a new thing we need to add to here. It needs to go right after my level 3 because whenever I make it through all 3 of my levels successfully, I want to go to the win screen, not the game over screen. And all the functionality is already set up with my buttons, so I don't have to worry about any of that stuff because I copied it directly off of my game over screen. Next, we need to do a little bit of work on our death barrier. So let's go to a screen that has it. Let's start with our, let's save this, obviously. So on here, scroll in. I don't know why we were, because we were on UI mode. That's why we were so far away. All right, so The death barrier. It's this barrier down at the bottom. Remember, it is separate from the other barriers, but it needs to have a little bit of code telling the game what to do whenever the ball falls into the death barrier. So let's just make a code all for that particular function. Create C# script. We'll just call it death barrier because it's everything that's going to happen on the death barrier is going to happen on that script. So I like when names are matchy-matchy. Let me drag it up here. Scroll, 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 scroll. Death barrier. Double check my death barrier has it attached. It does. Perfect. And let's open it up. So we've already done a little bit of a similar behavior with our goal, right? We set our goal as a trigger, and we said, whenever something collides with this, then load this other scene, which is basically exactly what we want the death barrier to do. We want it to load the game over screen. So, it's going to take a while to load. So this is our death barrier. We know we're going to use scene management again. Unity engine dot scene management and semicolon. And we don't need to really do anything with our barrier on start, so I'm just going to get rid of that. For right now, we only need to worry about the update, where we need to look at it and say, if something hits me, then go ahead and load the game over screen. So to do that, if you remember from before, I'm going to give you a second to start typing before I start typing, but we used Ontriggerenter to create, or Ontriggerenter to create our functionality. We're going to use the same thing here. So it looks like this. If you have already started typing, then perfect. Oh, nope, that's not what I want. It just auto-filled all that for me. I didn't want that. Private. Oh, it's an update. That's why. I don't need my update. I am in the wrong spot and I've lost my place in my notes. Okay. You ever had a really long day, guys? That's where I am right now. Okay. So death barrier. We need to set up a private void, and we're gonna have it of type on trigger, and then we've got our big list here, Ontriggerenter 2D, and then we want to load scene manager dot load scene, just like before. And then usually what we have been doing is we've been giving it kind of something very flexible where it says basically load the next scene, like take our current build index and add one to it. We're going to very specifically call for the scene by name because game over may be the 5th scene, it might be the 3rd scene, and it might change at any given time as we're adding levels. So we want to make sure that we're always calling the same scene. So I know that I've named mine game over, no spaces, and I'm going to save that. So scene manager, load scene, game over. And now whenever I play my game and I hit play, see what happens here, see if it works. If my game will load, okay, boop. And I went to the win screen instead of the game over screen. And I know what I did. I changed my game over screen instead of my win screen. So I'll rename that and that will work. So that is all that functionality that we need for our game over screen. Let me look at this real quick. So game over looks like this. Win screen looks like this. Okay, so I named them the wrong things. So let's just rename these. All right. Are you going to let me click twice? Okay. Game over. It won't let me rename it. Okay, so let's call, because I renamed it something else. Windscreen real for now. And this one is game over. Perfect. Now let's go to our build settings because now everything's in the wrong order. So our win screen needs to go right after level 3. Our game over scene is still at the end. That's fine. Perfect. Now let's fix this. So sometimes whenever you're not paying any attention, you make bugs for very silly reasons, and you guys might have completely avoided this whole bug by paying attention to what you were doing, and that would be excellent if that's what had happened to me. Right, let's try dying again. Make sure it works this time. It did seem to take us to the right scene before, but always good to double check. Boop. And game over. Perfect. So now, whenever we enter the death barrier, we will go to the game over screen. So hopefully you have made it so that your game has its own flavor. You've got 3 different levels, and you've got a win screen, and when your ball falls into the death barrier, it triggers a death. So the next thing we're going to do is our game doesn't really have much going on as far as audio yet. We've got our visuals down, but we want to add in some audio. And it's always nice to have some like clue that something is happening, right? So there are on your resources on your Google Classroom. On your Google Classroom, I have added a free sound resources. Again, like it, well, or not, it decided to go away. But if you find a free sound resource you want to use, that's up to you. Kenny has some free sound resources right here. And there's many websites that I have linked. I've linked freesound.org. I've linked bensound, which is more for like long background music type sounds, not for sound effects, which we don't really need just yet. Sound effects on soundbible.com and audioblocks.com. I've linked all of those in the Google Classroom, so any of those that you want to give a try, go for it. Audio, I've done a little bit of research ahead of time and decided that I kind of like the sounds of the digital audio pack. It's kind of like futuristic and sci-fi and matches well with my general game design I've got going on here. So I need to I think I'm going to put my audio in the stock folder, and it's a stock resource, so it seems reasonable to use that. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my digital sounds, add it here, let it process. And I'm going to go through and pick out sounds that I think will represent what I'm going to use. So if you click a sound, whenever you import it, this little box should appear. And if you hit play, you should be able to preview the sound. You won't be able to probably hear them from your end, but I will hear them from mine for now. That's all that matters. I like this one. It kind of sounds like it's like bouncing off of something. So I'm going to grab this. And I don't have a folder to put it in just yet, so I'm just going to drag it out, make a new folder. And let's call it audio. And put my stuff in my audio folder. Okay, and I want my ball to be making the sound, so I'm going to find my ball prefab, and I'm going to add a component to it, and I'm going to call this an audio source. So for this audio source, I don't need it to play on awake, because that just means as soon as the item loads, it makes the sound. I don't need that. And I do need to drag the audio into this audio clip portion. Right now there's no way that it knows how to play, so I'm going to go into my scripts and go into my ball script right here. And we're going to add a new section. And this one is very similar to what we did just a few minutes ago. So we need to make a private void. And this one's going to be on collision enter 2D. And on collision enter 2D, we want to say get component. And much like the rigid body up here at the top, get component, we need brackets. In the brackets, we need to tell it which component we're looking for. And in Unity, if you want to look for what it's called, we need the audio source component. So audio source. And with the audio source component, it's got these two open and close parentheses after it. And we want to play, which is a command within that component. So it should say, basically, whenever you collide with something, you play this sound. Let's test this out. All right, we've thought about life. I might have hit play twice. I might have started playing it. Oh, I started playing it. Okay, so it played. It did kind of start playing a little bit early, but you do see there's a little audio listener on here now. And I think it was playing a little bit early because it was every time it kind of touched the paddle, it was running that script. So we actually already have in place this bool that says has started. So let's just enclose this in an if statement. So basically saying if the game has started, then you're allowed to play this. Basically just make it so that it's not colliding with the paddle and making that sound randomly before it needs to. Yeah, so that's basically all there is to that. We will do a little bit more tuning and tweaking to that later. But now the ball will make a sound whenever it runs into other things. We'll add much more sounds to this, like sounds for blocks breaking, and we'll add sounds for dying, and maybe even some background music. So this is just a little introduction to that. So now that we've got our core functionality in the game, the paddle moves, the ball shoots in the paddle, obstacles bounce the ball, and the goal triggers a move to the next level. I, in retrospect, should have added player dies when they fall below the screen to the core element, because that was clearly something we needed. Otherwise, the game would just go on infinitely, kind of a game-breaking bug, right? So those are all done. Now we're on to all of these secondary things. So making some of our objects breakable. We want to make some of our objects that move. We're adding sound effects and particle effects, and we'll add some scorekeeping. So that's where we're going from here.